Hello race fans, my name is Taylor and welcome to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Before we go into this weekend's race, let's pump the brakes a little bit and take it back to the Daytona 500. It's important to go over a little bit of the details there so we can prepare ourselves for this coming weekend's race, talking about the driver lineup and the odds going into this weekend. So, coming off the Daytona 500, won by Michael McDowell, by the way, which was no fluke. He's a great driver at this superspeedway and at superspeedways in general. He has the best average finish at the Daytona 500 at the Daytona track over any other active driver. So he absolutely worked hard to get this win, and he was also in a fantastic spot at the right time, taking advantage of his position on the track. So congrats to Michael McDowell on this win. With that win in the first race of the season out of the way, let's go to the point standings here. Austin Dillon is topping the charts, as you can see. Denny Hamlin right behind him, Kevin Harvick, the big two of last season, topping the charts very early. No surprises, but we have to keep in mind this is the first race of the season, so this chart is going to change quite a bit, hopefully, throughout the rest of the races. And our first place finisher of the Daytona 500, Michael McDowell, on this chart, 5th in points standings, automatically into the playoffs round of 16. The second place finisher of the race is 4th on the points chart. Chase Elliott finished 2nd in the race after a caution was thrown on the white flag for a horrific wreck in which everyone was thankfully okay. It was scary for a lot of drivers. Brad Keselowski had a very heavy hit into the wall. So everyone was okay. What wasn't okay was the horribly timed commercials of this race, cutting the action off for the fans at home and Mother Nature, which threw a wrench in the race almost 6 hours into like a rain delay and had the race starting up again at 9 o'clock at night, ending at 12:30 a.m. for East Coast folks. And I know that was a horrible transition. I'm very sorry, but I had no other way to segue into this. At the end of my podcast, with all this considered, I rated the Daytona 500 65% out of 100, but I know I was way generous. I was too generous of this rating. I felt like I couldn't give the Great American Race an F rating. That just seemed really wrong to me, but if I went with what my gut told me and what I really felt, I would have honestly given this race a 40%, and it was just not great. And it wasn't because there was like no wrecks. I mean, we had that early wreck which took out half the field, which I think really affected how the drivers race. They were single file the rest of the time, and the rain delay, and I don't know. I would have honestly given it a 40%. If I could take it back, I would, but it's already on the chart, it's already in the podcast, so I can't. I just can learn from that mistake and move on. And apparently, I'm not the only one that felt this race was not good. This year's viewership numbers, according to Jeff Gluck on social media, were horrific. And I was going to say really bad, but that's an understatement. They were horrific. This is the worst Daytona 500 viewership, I think, of all time. Fox rating got a 2.8. I'm not kidding you. It is a 2.8. Last year's race rating was a 4.4, so this is a downslide from what we had last year. This year's 500 started out with a 4.7 rating, but I know with the delay and the lateness and everything I already mentioned, I think dropped the ratings down. And I'm looking at the trends from the past many years on viewership for this race, and the highest rating I'm seeing is 2006, where Jimmy Johnson won the Daytona 500. The rating was 11.3, so comparing that to today, not good at all. The past 5 years, the highest rating was in 2017, 5 years ago, when Kurt Busch won with a 6.6 rating, and over time, I'm seeing, unfortunately, this trend of how well the races were viewed go down and down every single year. I'm really disappointed. I thought we brought in viewership, and I thought after all the changes last year, we brought in a lot more fans. There was a lot more excitement around NASCAR, the first sport to successfully come back pretty much full time. But I know with change comes a lot of people leaving the sport. Change also brought in a lot of people. So I think it was a mixture of the rain delay, the time, and some of the broadcasting. And I'm going to throw in the early race wreck that took out half the drivers, the great drivers that people were watching and rooting for, I think affected the ratings of this race. So I'm hoping that trend does not continue. What I do hope trends upward is Clint Bowyer's performance in the booth, and another horrible segue, but this week, as the week went on, Clint Bowyer did an amazing job in the booth. He performed better and better each race, and he was a great addition, great expression in his voice, adding a little extra excitement to the race. So props to him for a great week and a continuous, hopefully great more weeks in the booth with Jeff Gordon and Mike Joy. At this point, I have left everything on the table about my Daytona 500 thoughts. I'm pretty sure I have. So let's move on to the next race of the season, the O'Reilly Auto Parts 253 at the Daytona Road Course. And let's go into detail a bit. This weekend's race is 70 laps around the track, 253 miles long of a race. Every lap made is 3.61 miles, and every lap has 14 twist-in turns to get around. This is the second time the Cup Series has raced this configuration that you see here on your screen for points races. Turn 1 is a turn we have seen the drivers have many issues with, within the Clash at least. It is a heavy braking zone, too much on the gas, and those cars miss the turn completely or spin out. Turn 2 is a zigzag into Turn 3, which is the International Horseshoe, making a right into Turn 4, leading into another heavy braking zone of Turn 5. Like Turn 4, it is a tight turn into Turn 6, rocketing the drivers out into Turn 7 and 8, or NASCAR 1 and 2. They're called NASCAR 1 and 2 because they are the Daytona International Speedway's actual parts of the track of Turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. So NASCAR 1 and 2 are Turns 7 and 8. Then we go into Turns 9 and 10, which the drivers slow down into the chicane, also known as the bus stop. And Turns 9 and 10 lead into 11 and 12, or NASCAR 3 and 4. Finally, we go into laps 13 and 14, which are designed to slow the cars down before heading back on track to the start-finish line. Now, this is a lot, I know, and a lot of me saying turn, but it's important to know these turns to understand why the cars are doing what they do on the track and to better acquaint yourself with the certain spots of this track. During the Clash, we saw issues with dirt all over the track, and the drivers had issues with driving and visibility. Now, these photos come from Denny Hamlin, and Bob Pockrass reposted these on a social media page, but it looks like either all around the track or at the crucial parts of the track, the chicanes and other places, that they're adding cement to the edges to try and avoid dirt buildup all over the track, or they're trying to avoid the drivers slipping and sliding. They're also adding turtles, and the turtles are just a nickname. They're actually little steel strips that are kind of like speed bumps put all around the chicanes to help the drivers slow down and keep them on the track. And you don't want to run into them, so it's a great incentive to stay on the track, because you run into them, your car can kind of go flying in the air, or you can wedge your nose into the turtles. You don't want to do that. So I'm glad they're taking this measure to keep the track clean and keep the drivers safe. Daytona always does a great job keeping their track, and with the road course, renovating it and keeping it new, refreshed, and exciting to watch. I'm really anxious to see how these changes help the drivers or how they affect the racing on the track as the cars go to the green flag, which this week the driver leading the cars to the green flag is Chase Elliott. So let's start by lining up the field. Here you go with your lineup for this weekend's race. Now, without qualifying or practice this week, the lineup was determined by a number of factors, including previous finishes and points. There's a formula out by NASCAR to determine the driver's starting positions without the qualifying and practices, and here's what it breaks down to. It's 25% of the driver's finishing positions from the previous race, 25% car owner finishing positions from the previous race, 35% team owners' points rankings, and 15% fastest laps from the previous race. What I think is great about this formula, it is a race-by-race basis, so it doesn't always allow the same teams to start in the front row. It means if you do great one week, you're rewarded by having a great starting position the next week, and it doesn't always count the teams that usually start in the back out of the race, because as you see for Daytona, we have drivers that did great the whole race, then crashed out, and we have some drivers that started in the back, finishing in the front. That means those drivers will probably start towards the front of this race. So unfortunately for all the drivers, your road course champion, Chase Elliott, is starting at the front of the field for this race. And with that fact, let's start by lining up the odds. Now let's go over this track's winner history. The first winner at this configuration was Chase Elliott, and then Kyle Busch won here at the Clash last week. And Blaney was leading there, and then they crashed at the end, him and Chase Elliott, and Kyle Busch was just in the right place at the right time. And so there's not a lot of history here, because the history at this configuration has only just begun, which makes the numbers here really tricky. And I usually like to really look at the numbers and determine who's going to win from that, but you really can't here. There's not enough to average out. So now we know Chase Elliott is the road course master, so there's no questioning his abilities here as we go to pick the winner for this weekend. I mean, Hendrick Motorsports in general has led 252 of the 463 laps even driven at this track. But I don't want to jinx him here, but at some point, someone else is going to have to win. It's just how the odds favor out. You flip a coin, it's not always going to be heads, it's also going to be tails sometimes. So Chase Elliott came so close, like I said, during the Clash, and then finding his way to victory with Ryan Blaney, they got into it, and the Kyle Busch won. So with that said, and I might be making a big mistake, I don't think I can choose Chase Elliott to win this race. I'd like to see him defend the road course champion here, but I don't think I can choose him to win this race, so I'm going to look at 4 other drivers who I think have a pretty good shot. Now, I want to mention Ryan Blaney first. He has run really well at road courses in the past few times and in general. I mean, you see him always finishing usually in the top 10 and always in contention. As the theme from last year, though, something that always happens to him is he wins and he's in the front and then he crashes out or something happens and he's at the back of the field. But he is a strong competitor for this weekend. Of course, I'm going to bring up the Clash again. He was in the lead, just unfortunate accident at the end. So don't count him out for this weekend. Also, no surprise to this list of 4 drivers I'm also bringing up is Martin Truex Jr., who has almost given Chase Elliott a run for his money on every road course that we have raced in the past few years. And he's also, in general, a very great road course driver. And he also did well during the Clash until he literally made one mistake after another, and it cost him what I think he could have had the win because Chase was still fighting his way through the field at this point. But if he's mistake-free this time, I think he has a good chance of winning. The next driver I have on this list is Denny Hamlin, who did really well at the Clash last week and who was consistently in the top 10. He also finished second at this configuration last time we were here in 2020. Finally, the last driver I want to look at is maybe a surprise, a little bit of the underdog here, but Michael McDowell, who finished, of course, first in the Daytona 500. Now, I'm adding them to this list because he has momentum to carry over from that race into this configuration. And Michael McDowell is seemingly pretty good at road courses. He's always in the front. He might not always finish in the top 10 at road courses, but he's always in the mix. So I can't count him out, and I think with the momentum from last win and his team's excited, they feel like they can really do well this year, I think he is a strong contender to take the win this weekend. But with all things considered and looking at these drivers' highs and lows, I think it is most likely out of this list that Ryan Blaney is going to be your winner this weekend at the O'Reilly Auto Parts 253 this Sunday, February 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fox. With the winner pick, there's nothing left to do other than to watch the race this weekend and see who takes the checkered flag. So thank you so much for listening to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Be sure to watch this weekend's race on Fox at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and tune in next time where I'll break down the race for you and rate it. And hopefully it's better than the Daytona 500, which I think it will be. So make sure you watch the race, and until next time, I'll see ya.